it's very interesting, and it troubles me in the way that we run the economy. And for that reason, Africa and Kenya, for that matter, becomes a very unfortunate place to invest in because of such ways of looking at how we manage things.
Mr. Manyasi, I like your reasoning there, because that's a question that has been asked primarily by various stakeholders, especially in the private sector. Why are interest on loans far too high? And there was some of the proposals that were given some years back before the CBR was actually set at some point, and CBK came in as a regulator to just put it there, because you've seen they reduced, the CBK reduced the benchmark lending rate from 8.5% to 7% to just, to signal the re-entry of cheap loans. But they are still too high. And there was talk of having, different sectors paying different loans at a different rate. The corporates a little bit higher, individuals a little bit low. And as far as, having this actualized, well, it was just a proposal that never saw the light of day. And I totally agree with you on that aspect. At what point, how much in terms of profits should commercial banks really make to a point where they feel satisfied? I think it is ungodly, especially at this time. And these are totally my opinions. It is ungodly at this time. But being a capitalistic state, banks are still going to squeeze us a little bit more. That's my take. I don't know what Victor and Jane have to say in regard to the banking, commercial bank situation there as we come to a close, as we wrap up in the headlines. What's your take, Victor, in regard to, how banks are treating their clientele at this time, especially people who are struggling to pay off those loans?
Right. It's a question that many people are still asking themselves. As, Kenya, most people are struggling to keep afloat financially. Many people are also still struggling to service their loans, as we've correctly put it. But then there is that government regulation and the national bank regulations, which, remember, the National Assembly had a very tough debate on where to have the interest rate capped. And they were talking about the 13%, it went to 16%. There was a government waiver at some point, and then it was revised. This was at the beginning of the pandemic. But even then, people are still struggling to service their loans that they had. And if I had something like 100, 200,000 shillings or 300,000 shillings, and look at the interest rate, some people will be actually demoralized on how to service these kind of facilities. And therefore, it still needs a lot of discussion, even with the government, as we move forward on some of the limitations and where the interest rates should be capped, so that it can be so easy for Kenyans in general. Jen?
Absolutely, and this also boils back to the whole conversation of the rise of fintech, because in as much as and just looking at 2020 in itself, fintech was basically, for most Kenyans, what they were depending on. I mean, just looking at M-Shwari in borrowing every single day. And these are only two platforms. What of the many others that are there that people can just go ahead on your app store, download, get your quick load, pay back, and looking at the interest rates there, they're actually crazy. They are not controlled, and by virtue of them being so available to everyone, people are, enticed and allured to that. But looking at what the government can do for the people, they stand to protect the people better, as opposed to these fintechs that are just here to make money at the end of the day. When you default, they block you. And looking at what the younger people are doing, because this was actually an actual conversation on the socials. Somebody was giving out pointers on how to keep borrowing. Ukiomba, you default, replace your SIM card, borrow again. And that has been the norm for so many young people, and consequently, CRB list inaendelea kugrow. People are not getting good loans. Those that are getting loans, some of them are defaulting, others they're getting their property repossessed, and at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose situation. That's what I think.
Right.
Then someone said, everybody, literally, everybody owes someone something.
Something.
Even our unborn children.
Everybody owes someone something across this country. And it might not be in monetary terms. You might not be having a bank loan somewhere, but someone must have extended you something that you needed at that time.
You may not even know it, by the way.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes, everybody owns everybody something. And I'm hearing our sound guy reminding Jane that akona deni. I don't know, Mr. Manyasi, talking about debts, yeah? As we come to a close, let's hear from you, Mr. Manyasi, parting shot in regard to just our debt situation, moving away from the local situation where we're talking about commercial banks, non-performing loans, and the whole works. Kenya in itself, its debt situation.
Yeah, the debt situation in Kenya, of course, is worrying. And for me, the reason why it's worrying is not because of the figures, but because of the fact that we may not have the capacity to make money as a country to be in a position to pay back on the debts that we have. And all indications out there, if you drive in a petrol station today, there are not many vehicles fueling. So what was even the point of increasing the cost of fuel? I like giving the practical example of bread. If you know that a family takes bread and there are 4 of them and at 100 bob, and you decide to make the loaf of bread 300, and then instead of eating every day, they eat bread once every 4 days. I mean, the net effect is the same. They are more hungry, but at the same time, they have given you less. So this argument around increasing taxes and imagining that will automatically give you more income in terms of tax is not obvious and it's not automatic. So as a country, I think innovation is going to be key. During times that as this, extraordinary times require extraordinary thinking. I think that people who are economists and those who are handling our economy need to start appreciating that thinking differently is not necessarily getting out of context or getting a risky kind of route. It's important that we start thinking differently as a country. COVID is unknown in terms of how long it's going to be here. As a country, we have only the capacity right now to vaccinate almost 1% of the population. So in terms of managing our economy from outside of the vaccination, it's going to take a while. And so unless we pray that COVID ends tomorrow, we need to think differently in terms of the way we manage our economy.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Manyasi, closing up in the headlines for us this morning. Indeed, we need to look at things differently if we are to survive. Remember, the CBK has retained its benchmark lending rate at 7%. It is a wrap in as far as in the headlines is concerned. You can get further details on our website, that is www.kbc.co.ke. Do not go away. We have so much in store for you, matters of politics as well as matters of health. I'm Regina Manyara.
Ni mimi. Ulitoa pikipiki? Mlitani sitaomoka. Ni yako. Hii nduti ni yangu. Niliwahi pale Quickbit. Quickbit? Quickbit imekuja kusaidia wananchi kama sisi. Nilinunua 399 shillings. Nilikuwa the lowest unique bidder. 300 199 shillings. Quickbit shilingi moja unaweza nunua fridge. Shilingi mbili unaweza nunua microwave. Shilingi tano unaweza nunua hata gari. So tupeleke huko hata mtu aende huko.
Jiunga na Quickbit ni rahisi. Enda kwenye M-Pesa, bonyeza paybill kisha weka business number 4032353. Kwenye account weka kodi ya bidhaa unayotaka na bidi yako ya chini zaidi. Kwa mfano TV 16. Kisha weka shilingi 20 tu kama idadi yako. Weka bidi yako pia kwenye www.quickbit.co.ke. Kumbuka, bidi ya chini zaidi ya kipekee ndio hununua. Quickbit, bidhaa bora kwa bei ya chini.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
You will not escape. Just move aside, or else I will forget that you are my family.
Ashok. And if that old lady ends up mentioning our names at the royal court, then it would be impossible for us to escape.
Do you remember? I had told you that there's a sorcerer who can solve all our problems.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
If she wants you to leave, you should. Let's save each other the embarrassment of having to use force here.
Promise me that you're never going to deceive me.
And my feelings for Marianne is far stronger than I've ever felt before. If I have to confront the Montesinos for her, then I'll do it.
So you can rest easy, because no one is going to speak ill of my family or of my decisions. But I'll keep on defending her no matter what.
Fight for the love that you have for that man. Yeah.
Unichukulie kwa mfano ndani ya matatu.
Yaani mtu mzima na miaka zake hizo miaka zote. Mtu ajui kujua kuandika note. Note tu peke yake. Kusoma kweli itasaidia.
Nini nakusumbua na nini?
Nauliza. Ni bwana.
Don't you dare insult me, okay?
Mama Angel.
Don't you dare.
Haya, kwani wewe yani wataka kumpiga? Huwezi mpige umpige nini?
All right, good morning, and you are just right in time for People and Politics on this particular day. We have got a candid conversation from now until the end of the hour, and of course, we are going to dig deep in some of the matters affecting you regionally, internationally, and even on a personal level. With me, we have got two gentlemen who a few minutes ago were with us during the in the highlights, and of course I have got Alex Manyasi, who is a governance expert, advocacy policy and management specialist. I also have Hamisi Mboga, that is a political analyst, consultant on governance, devolution and leadership. He's also the former Secretary General, Association of County Government of Kenya. He also holds Masters in Administration, University of Birmingham, University of London, and BA from Kenyatta University. We are going to have a candid conversation, and of course they're joining us via Zoom, and they are going to give us more analysis on what is happening currently. Gentlemen, if you can hear me, now let's start with the issue of the BBI. We know that the Parliament is going to have a special sitting today to discuss the matter of the BBI. Now, Manyasi, if I start with you, what do you think, what do we expect from the floor of the House today?
To be honest, I don't know. So Parliament has been asking that they will need to have a say in the process, and what therefore they're asking for is that they will want to have input into the document. So some of us had thought that Parliament was going to act as a conveyor belt, so to speak, but they want a bigger say in terms of wanting to have an input in the document itself. Whether they can have a bigger say in terms of the materiality of the document and the fundamentals of the document, that would be a different question altogether, because my imagination would be that why take the document to the county assemblies, they are passed, then you come and then we mutilate the document and before it's taken to the other processes. So some of us have challenges understanding why that should be the case, but at the same time, and then you start asking what the role of Parliament then will be if they are technically just going to be a conveyor belt in terms of moving the document from one step to another. Whether they will decide to have a say, let's wait for the end of the day.
All right, if I can just get back to you, Hamisi, then somebody will ask himself or herself that if they are going to have an amendment before the floor of the House, then what was the reason of having a popular initiative if members of Parliament are still going to debate about it?
Oh, thank you. This is another very interesting session. In fact, Manyasi said he doesn't know. Me, I have a feeling I know. There'll be fireworks. There are fireworks because there are people who believe that if we are to follow the Constitution, then let's follow the Constitution, because what does the Constitution say in this particular aspect? If people want to change, why change now? If I was supposed to advise them, and I really want to be the advisor, they can employ me, is let's pass this one according to the Constitution, the way it is, and we have learned immediately after that, then if now they know there's a problem in this Constitution, and we were saying before, some of things should be looked at. Then they can start now. Any other change, then it can go through this proper discussion. But now that we have reached here, I personally believe we are delaying a political decision that will affect all the Kenyans. Why don't they just pass this one? And we're still here. We were told the Constitution is a living organ and it's growing and it can be changed. But not now. I think the problem, not now. And these conflicts are all about interest. By the way, I'm looking at an interested group, which is okay because they're all interested. But also we are all interested. Those of us who passed the document all over the country, we are all also interested. Why don't we finish this?
All right. Alex, perhaps if you could just respond to this one, then how deep is the crack going to be? Because as it is, some people are insinuating that there is a crack between President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. I mean, they are the drivers of this particular initiative. So how deep is the crack going to be when finally members of Parliament have a time to debate about it today?
So the thinking is that if the president and the former premier continue being in charge of the process, then the imagination is that they will then bring the troops together and ensure that they do what is needful. That will be what they will need to do. Remember this whole thing about the handshake and the working together between the prime minister and the president, all was about ensuring that they push the agenda of the country and by extension the agenda of parliament forward. And so if their intention is to actually move that agenda forward, you could have a lot of noise from every place here and there, but ultimately they will have the final call, because I do not think that the two principals will sit back and say, let's observe and see what happens. If this process was as important as they told us it is, because they have said time and again, the president has repeated time and again, the former premier has repeated time again about why this process is important. If that is the case, then they would rise to the occasion and make sure that they rally the troops towards making sure that this is passed. What I am personally concerned about is what Hamisi has already mentioned, is if the process is a popular initiative, then what I said about a conveyor belt, that's what Parliament should be. Any introduction of roadblocks along the process at this point in time will then start bringing the discussion around then what is the process of amending the Constitution through a popular initiative. If that process then is wanting, then what are the options we have for the country? But as at now, I think the onus is on the two principles to guide Parliament. I'm saying guide Parliament because I know what that means in terms of what needs to be done today and going forward.
Alex, just to bring you up to speed again, the process as it is, it's a bill, and according to Article 257, it was a popular initiative which went to the IEBC, and IEBC now forwarded to the National Assembly. So what process do members of Parliament have to do with it then?
So every bill has to go through Parliament. That's basically why Parliament is looking at this bill. And then once it leaves Parliament, then it's supposed to go back. The only way that it can go back into being a referendum question, it has to pass through Parliament. So that's why Parliament has to be involved. However, you see, there are amendments that can go through Parliament directly. And especially those amendments that don't touch on certain, for example, the structure of the executive, the term limits and stuff like that. For those ones, then Parliament can sit. There are certain provisions within the Constitution where Parliament can sit and make amendments to the Constitution. But anything that is outside the mandate of Parliament, then it has to go through a referendum. And when you decide to do a referendum through a popular initiative, then it means that as a bill, that has to be passed through, I think, the two houses of Parliament. Then once that is done, if we expect a referendum by June, as has been said, then this process has to be completed within the timelines given. What we also do not want to see, for example, and I'm on record saying this, is getting a referendum too close to the election. We need to decide either we are doing the referendum now or handling the referendum at the time when we're handling the election. Of course, there have been complexities around people saying that if you take the referendum to the election, then that will be too heavy. But remember, we need to make considerations in many aspects, including what is it that the economy can handle? What is it that Mwananchi can handle in terms of handling elections? Because a referendum is an election. What is it that the resources that we have and the time that we have, so that we do not price the country way too long? Because if you take the referendum to next year, for example, then it actually means that we'll have set aside 2021 as a campaign year. So do we want to do that? And even at this point in time, as we discuss this, when the referendum finally comes amid COVID, how are we going to handle that? Those are the basic questions that we ask ourselves as a country.
All right, gentlemen, we are still in this, and stick around. We are going to have a very short commercial break, and when we come back, we are going to delve more into this, because as it is, does it mean that the issue of referendum is going to be jeopardized or prolonged, or even the 2022 general election? So those are some of the questions we are going to ask at the other side of the break. So right now, let's take a very short commercial break. We will be right back with more. So let me go straight to Manyasi. Manyasi, the question is then, how are we going to handle this, the referendum, now that we have got June deadline to achieve? Do you think it's going to be feasible? Are we going to achieve it?
Handling a referendum is possible to achieve within by June if the country so wants to do that. I'm saying it's achievable because the restrictions that have been given have not restricted people from walking into a polling station. There are also COVID restrictions that have been given by government to be followed. So we just need to follow that. Probably the only issue at this point in time will be, where will the polling stations be? See, those are the questions that now will need to be asked. If our schools will be in session, for instance, then how do you make sure that you are not interrupting learning? Because our learning institutions will technically be out of bounds because of COVID. But in terms of making sure that the referendum happens, yes, the time is there. The only thing that is required is for IEBC to prepare and deliver on the same. I do not think that the many campaigns that will be expected with a normal election will change the way this referendum outcome will be. I am not convinced that that is the case. And so whether you hold the referendum in the next 2 months or in the next 3 months, the outcome, in my view, should be the same.
All right, and of course, some would argue that members of parliament from both sides, that the Senate and the National Assembly, are just trying to create some tension during this process. Now, the question, therefore, is that do you really think that the issues that they're trying to raise to be amended in the bill are going to see the light of day? Hamisi, if you can hear me?
Oh, yeah. I was wondering, was it my brother Manyasi or Hamisi? I just wanted to, before I respond to that one, I just want to say we have time. If all the heads are together and the way the handshake started and the way it moved, it means there is a commitment from all the sides, all the stakeholders. And if the members of parliament also take it up, that actually this referendum is important, they can be able to sort out whatever is remaining from today. This can be done, and sure, it's going to be successful. All of us, if you look at those 9 points, we have been reading about them, we have been thinking about them. We have this hope that they will create a level playing ground for the future of this country. Two, if we don't, then it's going to create a bigger problem of what we have seen before. So if those were the issues, why don't we sort them out and believe the members of parliament, like all of us, know that they also need a level playing ground so that we can be able to go to the next election with no problems. And some of us were thinking, has it got to be August, the election? Why don't we go? We are used to December. When people are in holidays in Mombasa, you can come and vote here. In middle, this is also constitutional. So if you want to change this, if they want to change the process here, they also change the date of our next election so that we get more time to be able to do that. It's possible to be done, and I believe the stand of the principles that are in the handshake are solid. One of the things that I've learned in politics in Kenya, all the time when people say this will happen, the people who matter have to come in. I've never heard the president, I've never heard the former prime minister saying in the middle here. So according to them, when I look at them, I look at the body language, I look at their stance, they're for this. If you remember, several times the former prime minister said, I don't want to say anything until after the referendum. So you can see that commitment of making decisions that may affect the process are not made now, so that people finish the process and then we embark on the other one. The last point I want to discuss is we don't need more campaigns. Since the handshake started, since the BBI started, even a lot of friends of mine here, they're saying, when is it coming? So you don't have to have more time to campaign. You can shorten the process that it has been there before. So the pandemic has also assisted us because right now we would have been polarized by meetings everywhere. And because it is one election, like what my brother Alex said, let's organize it in such a way it is easier for everybody involved. Because do we need all those stations, like when we're doing a general election, or we need regional county stations or sub-county stations so that people just go and do it? 2 or 3, on the weekend, it can be organized in such a way that either we do it on Saturday, and then it's a one-day thing, we can finish it so that it doesn't interfere with other programs like school programs.
Okay. Okay, let me just ask this question. Do you think the BBI process is going to create a crack between the proponents, that is the ODM leader Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta? As people would say it, is there going to be a crack between them or a split amongst the political class?
As far as, because can I come in as the
Sure, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
The split will come when one of them, yes, the split can only come if one of them, either the president of this country or prime minister, stands up and says, this is a problem. Because we are dealing with leaders. I've seen, even when the handshake came, I just saw them and we all in. So my inclination, if there's no crack, or if the crack is anticipated, it can be sorted out by the two people, because they always they tell us what to do. There is this concept that people are thinking, but when says and the president says this, it will be done. If the Baba says X and the president says Y, then that's a problem. That is a crack. And since they are together until now, our belief is it will be the crack. It will be sorted out. I think the internal issue is for creating space for names and also space for elections. And immediately after this, if we don't want, this crisscrossing of parties or membership will start. Right now, people are thinking, which party will take me across? So there are other issues coming. Why don't I still come back? Why don't we finish this and then we see the crossing and the development, the alliances are coming politically because of the stakes are very high.
All right, thank you so much. Let me just bring in Alex now. Alex, if you can hear me. There are so many sticky issues in the BBI, and many politicians have been talking about whether to have that issue, some of those issues taken care of as it is, but we are yet to understand whether all the issues in the BBI should go to a referendum, okay? So, are we going to take a break right now? All right, so Alex, let me just ask you this one. Do you think all the issues raised by the political class should go to a referendum, or should there be multiple questions at the referendum as has been put by the politicians themselves? Alex?
Yeah, so I think the question is whether all the issues raised in the BBI process needed to be handled by a referendum. I think that should be the question. If you ask me, yes and no. Yes, because there are some administrative issues that still have been handled now without having to wait for a referendum. But having said that, there are clear provisions of the Constitution around what you can touch and what you cannot touch. And so, for example, anything that touches on the structures of government, anything that touches on the Bill of Rights, those ones you cannot amend unless you take them to a referendum. Remember, we also want to change the number of people that we elect, that hold offices at the highest level. Those things have to be voted in for them to become, to be implemented. Now, if you think about whether there are issues that need to be handled now before the referendum, the issue should be that if you're saying that there are issues that still need to be ironed out, for me, I have always asked, this process has been on for almost, I think, 3 years, if not more than 2. Then, and in any case, in any political process, there is never consensus. And that's why, from where I sit, I think the deputy president was clever. Some people had actually wanted him to be on the no camp, so that there's yes and no, so that whoever loses in the referendum technically will have a struggle to fight all the way to the election. But of course, being clever, he chickened out of that process, and therefore he's neither yes nor no, but at the same time, whatever the outcome, like Hamisi said, is what the outcome of this process is what will determine who is going to be working with who, because ultimately it will be clear in terms of whether there are additional officers that are going to be created or not. And therefore, those ones are going to be dangled in terms of looking at who are the people that I need to work with, and therefore, actions in government, are they being promised for purposes of that support?
All right, Hamisi, the question is that should IBC have final say in the creation of the proposed new constituencies?
Looking at, again, we must work under the law, and we must follow the law. If that is a function of the IBC, then we can prepare like what we're doing until the IBC prepares the question for referendum. We are also saying the same thing if the function, and if you look at the IBC Act, the function of determining, according to the law we have read, we don't know whether it can be changed or not. So we should prepare. We should also allow some of these offices to operate according to their functions, according to their rights. So what is remaining? We can decide as a country we want 20 constituencies, okay? Why don't they allow them to do that? It will be even better, so that nobody can say so and so influence. We can say IBC influence, so we can attack only one enemy. But if you say everybody suggests like what we did, if you look at the counties, if I was in power during that time, I would not have allowed some of these considering the numbers, the population. So why don't we leave this job to these people? How many, because we have already determined how many added constituencies we want. Let the IBC do their job, and then we can compare and don't come out with a formula. Why are they saying we add 2 in Mombasa and 3 in Mandera? So that people are all aware these are the criteria that were used to be able to determine whom to address. So I think it's IEBC's job. Yeah.
Okay, and the law clearly stipulates that there is no any legislative or any other law that can be amended a year to general election, and I'm so sure Parliament is quite aware of this. And therefore the question is, Bwana Hamisi, are we going to see Parliament rushing or trying to drag the process so that it enters into the red zone of the general election 1 year period?
Again, my experience, we have been here. Towards the end of every term, we see some of the changes being rushed in. That is a possibility. But whether they are meant to be wait to see. But because look at some of the things that Brother Alex has said in terms of what can go to the referendum and what should also be just done through policy and also through legislation in Parliament. So there'll be a lot of activities, I think, from today onwards. The moment we agree on the process, those 18 laws that will guide the process of handshake are part of the law. So there'll be discussions around them. And any other, because we elected these people as representatives, therefore they have also a legal mandate to introduce anything that will assist this country. So to rush to pass some of the things touching on the states, I go back to that concept of the states.
All right. I think that's a better point to have that much needed break. All right, so gentlemen, stick around. We are having